Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Breaking History, where we got a lot to go through. We don't have a lot of time to necessarily go through a lot of it, but we have a lot of context to impose onto breaking events, as we always do. Gordon, how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm great, man. I'm great. How are you?
I'm okay. Just trying to keep my mind on the cutting edge of world events, and it's always a challenge. But I think we've been able to figure out a certain flow and a certain method, and I know neither one of us really had a lot prepared necessarily compositionally, but that never really stopped us before from saying something useful. I know that there's things I've been looking at this week. A lot of, big things. I'm in Canada, so there's some disturbing developments that have been brought forth by Mark Carney. At some point, I might share some of those considerations as far as new policy, structural changes that might be a bit disruptive to the hoped-for U.S.-Russian alliance and friendship, especially on topics pertaining to the Arctic, which you and I have talked a lot about, and I believe other forces with a lot of influence are looking at with great hope that this could be a flank, especially coming out of the Alaska trip. We have elements in Latin America, for good and for bad, some interesting signals being put out, but I don't know exactly. I'm at some point going to ask you about your thoughts on on some developments encircling, especially Venezuela. So we'll go there too, maybe the Middle East. But for the time being, I know you and I were just chatting a little bit, and you had made some interesting observations. The Europeans just came groveling in the wake of the Putin-Trump summit. You had many European so-called heads of state sent down to the White House, possibly to do damage control, but it was a pathetic set of visuals if you're a European leader. It was just embarrassing to see these kids just get chastised like school children in front of Trump. Everyone's seen the pictures, the videos. Not too sure exactly what they intended for that outcome as far as trying to mitigate the damage they saw of a potential U.S.-Russian friendship, or maybe ending the forever war in Ukraine. But what did come out of it is that there's not exactly a consensus even amongst European leaders. And although Meloni has said certain things, we like Meloni kind of, but she says stupid things. One of those things recently was the call for extending Article 5 security guarantees to Ukraine, which she said is a high priority, even though Ukraine is not in NATO. That's a bit weird. So might be smokescreen, might be a bit of a play that, that she's just playing into. But her deputy prime minister is somebody who has been on your radar, because he said some pretty useful things last week when Macron had put out a call along with Keir Starmer for sending European troops into Ukraine. And I was hoping you could maybe share that observation.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating one. Matteo Salvini. The thing we also, by the way, this is the first time I've seen you face to face since Deadwood.
Oh yeah.
So happy you made it home. That was
dude, that was
I've let the audience know a little bit. We don't need to get into the whole detail of it, but yeah, I think you put Zach Payne. Zach's always been the one who has travel issues, but your Odyssey put him to absolute shame.
It was surreal, man. It was surreal. And I'll say a word about that actually right now, because that's true. It's the first time we've really spoken on interfacing via this digital screen here. But that was not just one direction, because going into Deadwood, it took me like 42 hours or something to get into Deadwood, a simple 4.5 hour trip. It should have been 4.5 hours to fly from Montreal to South Dakota. That's all it should have been in a sane, normal world.
Yeah.
Didn't work out that way. It took me, I'm going to avoid all of the planes, trains, and automobiles, but basically I had to sleep in an airport, drive with one of the Badlanders who found themselves sleeping on the floor of the airport. The next day we
drove from Denver to South Dakota.
Yeah, right. The airport being in Denver, Colorado. And then we were like, well, it's going to be quicker if we just rent a car and drive for 9 hours, which we did. Pleasant conversations. That worked out. And then I was thinking, okay, well, I've used up all my bad luck charms. So certainly flying back home is going to be a breeze. But of course, then all of the Air Canada employees, while I'm thinking this, go on strike, and all flights of all Air Canada flights are indefinitely canceled. So now I have to try to figure out what to do. There's no customer service. I find some overpriced ticket, on a Tuesday, which itself gets delayed, that involves something like 4 layovers just to get to Montreal. So if all worked out well, it would have been still like an 18-hour trip, but it wasn't. We had to disembark on a plane. There's technical difficulties. The whole plane had to deplane while they fixed some glitch. And this is United Airways now. And so that resulted in a 5-hour layover additional. So you missed all of the connecting flights. It was insane. It was like 46 hours just to get back home. I was wrecked, but I had the best
46 hours to get home. Holy crap.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was, but again, the best night's sleep of my life, night and day sleep of my life. I appreciated my bed more than I ever have in my life. So that was joyous. But that was a crazy thing. So all that to say, it became funny. At a certain point, things couldn't get any worse, but they did. And it's insane. I couldn't feel bad about it because it was like you're living in a surreal satire. And it was just laughter giving at a certain point. It was like a bad joke that you have to laugh at. So overall enjoyable in that weird hallucinogenic way, because you're not sleeping either. All that to say, okay, so back to the original question now.
Well, and by the way, a lot of that stuff that you talked about would be mitigated. I have some experience and like professional experience with like airports and that sort of thing. If we could develop our regional airport system in America, which we haven't yet, most regional airports in America don't even meet the post 9/11 security requirements, which is not like I'm not like lamenting that, because I think that, speaking of Codex 9/11, like what a fantastic documentary that was.
That was incredible.
Obviously everything that spun out of 9/11 is a fraud and needs to be adjudicated and addressed. But the fact that money hasn't been set aside to upgrade these airports, these regional airports, speaks to the lack of investment that we've made in our infrastructure here in America. There are a lot of regional airports where they are like checking the bags, like they're like doing security checks of the bags in the lobby. Like I'm not kidding. There's no there's a SIDA line throughout every airport, which means there's like a clean side and like a public side, and the clean side, like once. And so there's like situations where a restaurant, they'll have like their one little restaurant vendor, and the kitchen will be like on one side of the SIDA line and the dining room will be on the other side. So every time the waiter goes in and out of the kitchen, he has to go through TSA and like be searched to like run food out, like that kind of stuff. So again, this isn't about like 9/11 or the Patriot Act. This is about the fact that we have invested $0 in the past 25 years in our regional airport system. And if we did that, then our flight, like the cost of flying would be much more in line with like what you see in Europe, where you can pay like $80 or $100 and fly across Europe, like round trip. Where in America, you're not going to find an $80 flight anywhere in America. And that's because, number one, the regulations, but number two, you have to everything has to like connect through all these stupid hubs and stuff, because none of the regional airports are fit out to, number one, handle any sort of traffic, but number two, like they don't have any infrastructure. So that's going to be a golden age discussion that we need to get into at some point. But it is all of that money that we should have been investing. And Trump, by the way, tried to put out like a $400 billion package back in 2019. I remember, because my industry was very excited about that. It was shut down by Nancy Pelosi. It never went through. But that was like, I think they carved out like whatever. It was like $40 billion for regional airport upgrades. Never happened. So these people want us to be poor, and they want us to be living in the past and living in like a dystopian third world country. Basically, all the money they've been siphoning out of us and sending overseas and laundering, all that money should have gone into this kind of stuff. And if they had, we would have flying cars right now. We would be traveling from Montreal to South Dakota would be nothing. You would just fly to a regional airport, no big deal, deplane, and maybe drive 30 minutes and you'd be at the facility. But again, like they can't do that because it's just there's so much incompetence, but the incompetence is planned.
All right, so let's push on this a little bit more because it's fun, and then we'll find an opportunity to vector back into the geopolitical conversation.
Yeah.
But this, this is fun. This is important. I didn't really see. I'm less familiar with the U.S. Management of air traffic and just general airports, like the whole airport service system in terms of how each state deals with it, how it relates to the federal. How the public and the private interact. These are things I'm not as familiar with, so I appreciate what you're saying, and I might have more questions for you, maybe off the record at some point. But I know in the case of Canada, I do get the sense that there is that there are ideologues both within the unions, as there are all across the board, but also embedded within the managerial structures of Air Canada itself, which want to destroy the idea, the culture of flight and mobility for the plebes, right? And it used to be, like, I know it was privatized back in 2003. Air Canada, which was one of the most like functional, affordable systems of the world. Like people would just go to it was so viable that you could just go in the 70s and the 80s, even into the early 90s. You could go to the airport and just buy your ticket there on site.
Buy your ticket at the plane. Like apparently you would just drive right up to the runway and it's like getting on a bus. You just buy the ticket from the stewardess, walk on the plane and sit down.
Yeah, pretty much. And there were many more jumbo jets in service. So they provided more capacity than they would need in general, because you always want to like over prepare rather than under prepare. Many of these things, especially after the privatization, they were like, well, everybody became obsessed with profit margins and extracting whatever you can out of the silkworms. Like the farmers extract silk out of the silkworms. That's how they saw humans, and that's how they saw their business. So they started like decommissioning the bigger jumbo jets, the bigger planes, to have smaller, tiny little planes that they would then overbook. So some people would get screwed because they would oversell their tickets, right, with tiny little uncomfortable planes. And they began to shut down a lot of the advantages and services that they were providing to their own employees, especially the flight attendants and all of the people who make it happen. And I was shocked, even in traveling, especially to the US. And I had a lot of time to talk to other flight attendants, to talk to other people working for United Airways, American Airways, a lot of the American services. And they were all telling me the same thing. Like the Air Canada employees they're getting so shafted. Nobody is treated like this. It's barely minimum wage, which it was never the case. They used to get paid well. It was like there were a lot of benefits. Now they're getting paid minimum wage. They stopped getting paid for all of the work that they do before the plane starts moving. So they only start getting paid the second the plane begins moving. So the 2 or whatever hours where the flight attendants are like working, they're actually working on the ground. They're not getting paid. It's free labor. And they stop getting paid when the plane stops moving. And even if they have other things that they need to do. So it's quite astounding how bad it is. And on top of that, it seems like a lot of the private investors of 2003 that took over control of this former national air flight service, one of the biggest ones was HSBC, the Hongsheng Bank of Commerce.
Yep.
Which loves to have that type of infrastructure in place where they could have, their own control of the planes going to and from like Asia and elsewhere to bring in all sorts of God knows what. We know that HSBC was found guilty for drug money laundering for decades. They are a drug bank after all. A big part of the narcotics, but other things too, right? As far as black operations are concerned, need to have private, kind of like what you had with the CIA, private Air America flight services back in the Cold War days that were useful to just be able to transport cocaine, heroin, other things from Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand into the United States. Same thing for Latin America. So I got the sense that this is fitting the profile. I can't prove it exactly, but it definitely fits the profile of a practice that's been going back a long time that benefits only the criminal underworld that is working with our intelligence agencies. And what do you got there? What's this?
Just to give some context, I just figured I just picked a random state. So here's New York State. Here are all the airports that currently exist in New York State. There are, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 airports that currently exist in New York State. Now, I believe only 2 of them are, look, maybe 4 of them, 5. So you got Buffalo is called international. Greater Rochester is called like you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like 8 of them are called quote unquote international airports. Now an international airport is a regional, like Richmond is called an international airport because I think it has 1 flight that goes to Canada. It's not surprising that these are called international. I bet you they have a lot of flights that jump over the border and go to Canada. So technically they can call themselves that. But 15 airports that currently exist in New York State, and 8 of them call themselves international airports. Try booking a ticket to any of these airports, and I bet you're going to have a really hard time flying anywhere that doesn't require you to first fly to LaGuardia or JFK down here and then jump on a little puddle jumper to land at one of these. I mean, it is a joke. Now, granted, you have to like upgrade the runway to land larger planes, like those are those kind of considerations. But I bet you a lot of these airports you're seeing on your screen are what are called general aviation airports, meaning they don't run commercial flights. The international ones probably do, but like a general aviation airport is one that doesn't necessarily run commercial flights and is really more of like private, like people who just want to go fly Cessna, like they want to go get their pilot's license, or people or companies or individuals who have a hangar there that keep their private jet there. But I mean, think about that. I mean, if you took like New York as an example and you just extrapolated that, let's just say on average, there's 15 airports in every state in the country. That is what? I think that's something like 700. What is that? 750 airports. Someone check my math there, but I think that's. Is that right?
My math skills suck. I didn't even put my mind to the problem.
15 times 50, I think, is 750. Right. 750 airports in the country. Let's just say that you use it as the metric. Yeah. I mean, it should be much easier to fly across the country and much cheaper than it is right now. That's my point. The point that I'm making. Yeah. And the fact is that all the money that the public works project money that might make sense. And by the way, airports are not just like funded by tax dollars. I mean, the FAA absolutely is the one who decides which airports get money, and there's a lot of politics involved in that. But there's also a private partnership because you have the airlines, you have vendors, you have private interests that want the airports there, industries, that sort of thing. But again, none of that money has been invested, and when it does get invested, it goes to these super airports like LaGuardia or JFK. Try flying into JFK. JFK is a joke. Last time I flew in there and I had to change flights, I had to get in a taxi cab, leave the airport, drive around the city, come back to the airport, go back through security again to get on the second leg of my trip.
What?
Oh yeah. It's again, like it's laugh out loud funny what we have done to ourselves. And I don't understand how this happened. I mean, this is obviously just a series of unfortunate missteps and events that have probably been guided to some extent. But the point is that, this is the stuff that we should be focusing on fixing in the golden age. And for whatever reason, we're distracted by shiny objects. Some of them are worth pursuing, some less so. The Republicans want us talking about 2026, like the midterm elections. The Republicans want us talking about who's going to run for president in 2028 right now. And it's like, we have a lot of problems that we have to solve in this country. Number one being state capture. Number one being who is it that actually controls the federal government? That needs to be run down and fully adjudicated, and people need to go to prison, if not, face more severe charges. Don't talk to me about an election that's happening in 3.5 years. Like, I don't want to hear about it. I have zero interest in an election that's happening next year, frankly, because they've accomplished absolutely nothing in the past 10 years. I mean, since Trump came out.
Yeah, no, it's clearly a cop out. Like it's a cowardly cop out to try to change the subject from what they should be doing to something technical about the deep abstract future. In that sense,
which is why I find myself so invested in the geopolitical, like the story of the geopolitical storyline, because I think that's ultimately what's happening here. Is you have these characters who are working together to bring down this cartel that I think forces itself on every single country to some degree. So, and by the way, last week when you were gone, we talked about, I took the opportunity to do a deep dive into the theft of the PROMIS software by Mossad from the DOJ and all the people who were involved in that. Meese, the attorney general under Reagan, being like at the heart of the whole thing. Yeah. And, like the Reagan administration being in on it, the Vice President Bush, who became president, probably being in on it to some extent. The whole thing is just, it just reeks, man. It just reeks. And that PROMIS software theft is probably how this transnational cartel, got a lot of their blackmail, I would assume, because the PROMIS software, of course, is a prosecutor's management information system database. And so if you have access, they put a trap door in it. They stole it, put a trap door on it, sold it to all the governments around the world. Anyone who's running a criminal investigation, they know exactly what the facts are. And that is a plethora of just blackmail material to go up to somebody and say, hey, you're being investigated right now for X, Y, and Z. We have the ability to make it go away, if you play ball with us.
On that note, I know that Benjamin Netanyahu, I just watched a video where he talked about, he celebrated Israel's role as the underappreciated but most influential member of the Five Eyes, which he said Israel is the sixth eye. And we've all kind of known that for a long time as far as this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, they get unit, whatever. That? He said that. I could upload the video after and play it. He literally came out and... Yeah, let me actually just pull it up, and while I'm talking, I'll.
Surprisingly, I haven't really been following Israel that much the past week. I've been following like every other geopolitical storyline aside from Israel.
For myself, I get a little exhaustion a bit, so I do need to take some time to pull back a bit.
Don't we all?
Yeah,
even I get fatigued from following Israel day to day, because it's like there's just so much to track with that.
I can imagine, man, because it won't let me upload the video. It says that we've got too much content already uploaded. That's okay. But yeah, he basically came out celebrating this fact. And I think it was, Unit 7400 was the name of the Israeli sort of, cryptography signals unit that's been an integral part of this global dragnet of surveillance. But I was wondering if you knew, like, at what point did Israel get sort of brought in? Even on their Wikipedia page, it's acknowledged that Israel is a part of the Five Eyes. Do you know, like, when the integration under the GCHQ, the MI6 operation, was sort of, when did that happen? Was it in the 80s under this PROMIS software shenanigan period, or was it even earlier?
That's something we should definitely run down. I mean, it seems to me from everything I've read that there's always been this intimate relationship, right? There's always been an intimate relationship. And in the 40s, when they were after World War II, when they were trying to do the UN partition plan, which was to formally create Israel out of Palestine, none of the military leaders, these would be like the veterans, the heroes of World War II, none of them supported it. They all said this is wrong. They sympathized with the Arabs. They said that, this is everything that we just fought against in Europe and in Asia. Like, this is imperialism. We're not doing this. But all the politicians in D.C. were bought off. And so even Truman, I think, pushed back on it and said he wasn't going to support it. And then, according to the biography written by, I think it was his butler, envelope of poison was sent to his daughter's house, and then his daughter, I think, also wrote an autobiography, and she said the same thing like years later. And basically, his daughter received an envelope of poison and didn't die, but that was enough of a threat that he capitulated. And then they made him, of course, go on television with this map of Palestine and explain to the American people, what was happening. And I think he even threw some comments in there like, they're not going to do it themselves, so we're going to do it for them. Which seemed a little like a backhanded comment, but it was definitely like a humiliation ritual, I think, on Truman to make him do it. That's my read, at least. And then, of course, he signed the National Security Act of 1947, which is what created the CIA. And the rest is history. So, all that's to say is like that year seems to be extremely significant. I mean, 1913, I think, is the year that they screwed up the money supply to G Money's point. I see G's floating around in here. He says, fix the money, fix the world. And yeah, I mean, 1913 is a very significant milestone in human history.
Yeah.
But 1947, I think, is really the year that I think, I guess that was the year that I think America in a lot of ways became subservient to the intelligence, like this intelligence apparatus. 1963, I think, is when it just became formal. I think that's when it became like a formal, like, all right, like JFK tried to stand up and do the right thing, and they showed the entire world, here's what happens when you stand up and try to do the right thing. And when you stand up to us, here's what we're going to do to you. And yeah, I mean, it was 5 eyes, 6 eyes, 7 eyes, if you want to throw the mafia in there, if you want to throw the Jewish mafia and the Italian mafia in there as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely important. Well, I was thinking about that a little bit because you're right. That was a serious breaking point, that 1946-47 period where you had the US UK signals agreement that established the foundation for the Five Eyes happening on the same day that you have the launching by Churchill of the Iron Curtain and the reorganization of the world under this new idea of making our former allies of World War II our new enemies, and our former enemies becoming our allies. So all of a sudden the Japanese and the Germans became our best friends, and we started like recuperating all of their Nazi and Japanese fascist killer apparatus and giving them new sweet gigs working for the CIA and NATO. So that was a big part of that. And the abandonment of the dream of a world without empire based upon a harmony of civilizational interests working for big projects to benefit their kids. Like that idea was scrapped as like a naive utopian idea of FDR and his allies, who were all like just purged. FDR was probably killed. But I think a big moment before that, which ties into the organization of the mafia brotherhoods before World War I even, was like, and this includes the Jewish mafias, especially that, what became the Mayer-Lansky crime syndicate afterwards, but earlier on under Bronfman, which had a big role to play of British Canada, was like, there's this book called Dope Inc. I always cite it. It's a great book, and it was like reissued several times over. I encourage everybody, if they can access this book, it's very expensive, but if you can get it, even online as digital, get it, read it. First published in 1978, but it goes through the sort of the technique used to create this organized crime apparatus. And what it involved was, first, this prohibition question was a big part of it. So before prohibition was done in the United States, it was first done for 5 years in Canada. And that was important because as soon as you legalize something that everybody's always going to want, alcohol, like, it's just a natural thing that people will kind of want it. To what degree they should abuse it or whatever, it becomes unhealthy, that's another question. But as soon as you impose this, you make it illegal, you increase the demand. You're going to then create an environment ripe for organized crime to build itself up. Right. And systems of graft will
create a black market to
naturally,
that can be exploited. Yeah,
exactly. So, but this is before the U.S. prohibition. It was already done in Canada, and this is where the Bronfmans became the place to go. They had early control of all of the distilleries, the black market sector, and they built up a system of graft with members of law enforcement. The political class became increasingly part of, like, they became assets of organized crime, and they interfaced with the early Italian crime families too. It was all part of this thing, and it seemed innocent enough. You could see how somebody would rationalize, well, it's just to, defend a few speakeasies in my district. It's not the worst thing ever. I'll take the money and I'll look the other way. And it seems easy and simple, but before you know it, you now have compromising. You've taken bribes, right? You can get fired for these things. Now you got shit that can be held over your head as things get darker and darker, right?
Leverage.
As now,
yeah,
and it goes its lawful path of sin to the point that you have much more of a program of like Mad Max logic, or Alpha Warriors try to come in. And I'm not talking about our friend Alpha Warrior, but I'm talking about the mentality of like Mad Max, the alpha dog of the pack that will destroy all of the beta dogs by every means
take a
necessary.
system and exploit it by pushing it to its logical
Yeah,
end,
exactly.
right? Yeah,
and now
yeah,
now you have those who have been patronized, who will, the ones who will really be successful, the ones who have been selected by the patrician class that runs the intelligence agencies to be protected, and they will then rise as the Bronfmans, who became, like Samuel Bronfman was knighted as a knight of the Order of Bath, one of the most powerful secret societies that's overseen by the monarchy of England. That was what he was made into. So, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. And then his kids, Edgar and Charles Bronfman, become the founder. You know, what Charles Bronfman in the 60s, 70s, 80s, he becomes like, you know, a privy counselor of Her Majesty. He's later on, you know, these are the groups that run Brascan, the thing that becomes Brookfield, that's tied to the whole Epstein operation that Mark Carney is overseeing later on, that we've talked about in a previous episode. So you got this, you know, intelligence agency thing that later is clearly grafted onto Israeli intelligence as part of what they'd always been doing.
Are you referring to the mega group?
The mega group interfaces with this, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Maxwell.
Yeah, it actually might be worth educating everyone as to what the mega group is, because I think this is pretty relevant to. Hold on, let me pull up my mind map.
Yeah.
This is pretty relevant actually to current events because it involves Les Wexner and Charles Bronfman. And so let me pull up.
Wait, well, you pull that up. Let me do this. Let me read the ad. I forgot to read today's opening ad.
Please do that.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, MyPillow. Here we are. A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving MyPillow with a ton of extra MyPillows. But do you know what? Their losses and your gain. MyPillow is offering the classic collection for wholesale prices. Only $19.98 for a standard MyPillow, but it gets even better. For a limited time, they are going to offer their entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Get a queen size MyPillow for just $24.98. Upgrade to king size for only $29.98. Get the body pillows for $39.98 and the multi-use MyPillows for only $12.98. So go to mypillow.com and use promo code Badlands or call 1-800-795-5154 to take advantage of wholesale pricing and receive $100 in free digital gifts when your order is $75 or more. That's right. Get the standard MyPillow for only $19.98. Go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-795-5154 and use promo code Badlands to get the standard MyPillow for only $19.98. All right. Thank you, Mike Lindell. All right. So, yeah, go for it, man.
Okay. Yeah. So the mega group, I guess formerly called the Study Group, was an informal group of influential Jewish entrepreneurs founded in 1991 by Les Wexner and Charles Bronfman as the Study Group. The group met twice yearly for philanthropic reasons, Jewish seminars. Like that was like the formal reasons that they were meeting. The official reasons, it is said to have had up to 50 members, including Hollywood director Steven Spielberg. Wexner led the group with Bronfman. It inspired several philanthropic initiatives, such as the Partnership for Excellence in Jewish Education, Birthright Israel, and support for the renewal of Hillel International. The group became known to a wider public through the Wall Street Journal report in May of 1998. As a pro-Israel lobby group, the organization is also said to have tried to influence U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. In 2003, it employed Republican political consultant Frank Luntz to help the group mobilize support for Israel. Under the name MEGA, the group also is said to have had contacts with the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad and to have served as a vehicle for influence operations in the United States. Jeffrey Epstein is said to have used the group to build up his network of high-ranking contacts in business, media, and politics. Wexner was Epstein's primary financial supporter, yet later claimed to have known nothing of his criminal activities. And then here's just a list of some of the members. And so you can see Les Wexner, Charles Bronfman, Edgar Bronfman, Max Fisher, Harvey Meyerhoff, Steven Spielberg, Lester Crown. I mean, there are some names
Michael
you're going to recognize, and a lot of names
Steinhardt.
are probably not. A lot of names are probably not going to recognize unless you've gone down some of these rabbit holes. But the point is that this isn't like a conspiracy theory. This is like they were out in the open to some extent doing this, and the purpose is that to advance the interests of Israel, which for a very long time we've been conditioned to believe that this is all a noble pursuit. right? It's a noble pursuit to advance the interests of Israel, even at the cost of U.S. interest and U.S. taxpayer. But I mean, you look at this list, you look at like just that 3 paragraphs right there, and there's a lot there that you can extract from that. I mean, Frank Luntz being involved in this group, 2003.
Who's Frank Luntz?
Frank Luntz is let me pull him up for you. You may not recognize the name. Everyone in the audience, I think, probably, if you don't recognize who Frank Luntz is and you're an American, you should know who this guy is, just because he's such a shill. But it's this guy. Like this is the guy who goes in like Fox News for years, has gone on Fox News and talked about polling and, trying to convince the Republican voter why Republicans keep losing elections or why they have to vote a certain way. I mean, this guy, I think, is very much at the heart, as far as I can tell, of the election integrity apparatus or the election disintegrity apparatus, right? And he's also was, by the way, roommates with what's his name? What's that former Speaker of the House? Who was the Speaker of the House in 2022? Someone in the chat will tell me. McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy. Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin McCarthy's this guy and Kevin McCarthy are like roommates in DC. Very strange. Grown men living together as roommates in an apartment. Very strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, Frank Luntz, creepy dude. And then so like here's a Wall Street Journal article about this group from 1998, and like openly talking about it. So this is not like internet conspiracy theory. They're openly bragging about this in 1998 in a Wall Street Journal article. And it's in the first paragraph, when movie mogul Steven Spielberg, Seagram chairman Edgar Bronfman Sr., and former hedge fund manager Michael Steinhardt met at Mr. Steinhardt's Manhattan apartment last month, the main topic was neither films nor high finance, but considerably more complex than either, being Jewish.
Mm-hmm. So, it's quite astounding, right? And this thing, to see that its influence is so expansive, and yet it's relatively young too. I think it was only founded officially in 1991.
Yeah.
So it
yep.
Yeah. So it existed under other incarnations, but the amount of support it gave under the guise of charitable organizations, of which thousands grew up like subsidiary, it's the Soros style of providing like philanthropic charitable front groups to be conduits for a nefarious agency that is more difficult to see if you have shell companies and just nice brands on the front. To move a bad idea forward under a different label. That's sort of what they were doing. And as you pointed out, Spielberg, the top Hollywood brass, many of the top Hollywood brass became absorbed into this thing. And that's a huge amount of influence. If you can control the levers of propaganda, like Hollywood is kind of like the modern myth makers of our society. They're the ones who operate on the sacred stories, the subconscious forces that are below the radar of our logic, of our reasoning faculties. That's a huge amount of influence to capture that power, which is why I guess the CIA has been so much on top of funding scripts and movies going back many, many decades. And I would say even to the earliest days. I'm talking about here. We're talking World War I period, because that was the era when you had right. So I'll wrap that up and I'll tie it in. Because Aleister Crowley was one of the earliest. He was on the cutting edge in 1916, 1917 during World War I, when Hollywood wasn't even a thing yet. But the idea, again, New York was sort of the filmmaking capital at that point. It's a brand new medium, but the power of this new technology was recognized by the good and the bad alike. There were good patriots trying to work to create movies that would edify and make a more educated, moral, and intellectual citizenry that could understand what it means to be a citizenry. And there's some amazing movies, more profound than people realize in the silent film era. But then you have also Aleister Crowley, the the B666, also getting on top of it and creating movies that are messed up. And people could even watch some of these things on YouTube even now that have survived the sands of time. But all that to say, so to finish what I was getting at, once this organized crime thing was built up in Canada, then prohibition was lifted in Canada at the same breath that prohibition was imposed into the United States. So now you had a very organized crime syndicate built up here, and then now it could be replicated in the US. So then the Bronfmans, the Bronfman dynasty that ran Seagram's, the distilleries of Montreal, became the conduits for growing and incubating this new emergent, Italian Jewish mafia system in the United States. And the thing that made it all possible, the secret sauce, was like the same people who were doing the Federal Reserve. People have heard of the book, the Creature on Jekyll Island, going through the 1910 meeting on Jekyll Island with the
6 guys we met there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And their appendages represent the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Astors, like the leading blue blood establishment. Many of those, I would say even all of those, were founding members and participants of the Pilgrim Society that was set up in 1902. Right. So you had the Pilgrim Society set up in 1902, which you've probably encountered this thing, right? The Pilgrim Society?
I probably only through you, honestly.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah,
I'm pulling it up right now.
That's a fun dive to go on. We could even have like a whole show just on that at some point in the future, because that's sort of like, people know the Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholarship, the CFR operation of the Roundtable Movement. Well, this is the underappreciated but extremely important part of it, which are known as the Society of Helpers or the Pilgrim Society, that had been set up in 1902, first in England, as an Anglo-American integration movement of the British and American Anglophiles who would strive to create an Anglo-American world empire, sort of undo the American Revolution and bring America back into the British fold as part of those responsible for the white man's burden. What do you got there?
Look, this is from the Wikipedia page. Let me just read this one sentence.
Yeah.
It says, the Pilgrims connected influential families in the U.S., such as the Astors, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Morgans, and the Vanderbilts, with the British nobility and royal family. I mean, that's really that's the only sentence you really need to read to understand what it is right there, right? And then it mentions the Warburgs down here. It mentions the Council of Foreign Relations.
Yeah, it's the whole group.
Crap.
All of the group these guys that set up the Federal Reserve to overthrow the constitutional banking system of America by creating this foreign agency that would be untouched by the political class as this like thing that would actually be run as a private enterprise with the JP Morgan apparatus playing a dominant role as a shareholder in this thing, which had to be kept secret as well. Like we only found this out by reverse engineering it decades later, because it was like illegal to show who were the directors, who were the shareholders of this thing. But all that to say, it's these guys. It's a foreign. It wasn't American. It was a foreign induced takeover of American finance by this thing. Now, what else did these groups do? Well, if you look at what they were doing at this time, and here we're talking the death of McKinley, 1901. McKinley is dead. He's murdered. Then his enemies take over, and you have this Anglo-American sort of first draft of what this will look like. You get like Teddy Roosevelt, who's this Confederate-loving jackass who, he's tutored by his uncle, John Bulla, who's the head of the Confederate Intelligence Secret Service stationed in Europe, in England, who he helps Bulla, who trains him to write his memoirs and this new history of American naval intelligence. So he's trained by this grouping. He then creates the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which all of a sudden takes this very good, noble idea of the Monroe Doctrine, which is what McKinley died fighting to defend, which is keep out imperial institutions from all of the Americas. Just make sure empire does not contaminate the Americas. And he turned it into the Roosevelt corollary, which is this big stick diplomacy that justified the idea of making America become an empire, go in and overthrow nationalist governments more aggressively, both in North America, but also then in like the Philippines. That was part of the Teddy Roosevelt idea of the Philippine War against Spain, which was brutal. It was a mass extermination campaign modeling itself on what Cecil Rhodes had been doing in the Boer War, on the worst of the empire that he admired. And then he had this special friendship with King, Edward VII, the sociopathic Templar king of the Grand Master of World Freemasonry that he had a special friendship with. And they had all these like posters celebrating their union of Anglo-Saxon, governments to reharness to take control of the world, basically. He brought in eugenics. He brought in Albert Pike, created the statue there in Washington to celebrate the murder of McKinley and the restoration of the Confederate ethos. And this is the guy who then invites in, or he helps create a space for William Rockefeller, the Astors, who set up the Sleepy Hollow Country Club, and they invite in figures from British intelligence, because, you know, British intelligence, that what becomes the MI6, MI5, are being set up at this very same time, 1907, 1908. And one of the key figures is this Charles Bonaparte, the cousin of Napoleon Bonaparte, or Napoleon III, the Emperor of France, who has a special English relationship. He's the district attorney of the United States under Teddy Roosevelt. And this guy then sets up what becomes the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in 1908. So he does that. This weird creature who's tied to the black nobility of like Europe becomes district attorney, or attorney general, sorry, I should say, of the United States, sets up the FBI under Teddy Roosevelt. And you have Claude Dancy, the guy who sets up MI5, a former like Boer War murderer, mercenary under Cecil Rhodes, brought in. He sets up MI5, Claude Dancy. People could Google that. And he comes in, he's invited by William Rockefeller in 1909 to come to the United States under the Sleepy Hollow Country Club. There's a whole biography on this guy. The Sleepy Hollow in upper state New York, that's like the intelligence hub that was built up by the Vanderbilts. I think it goes back as like an occult center to the earliest days of the United States. I think that's what Washington Irving actually was exposing in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which people could reread with this new appreciation for what this deep state was and these leading families. But this Sleepy Hollow Club becomes what Dancy uses as his base, and which interfaces with Aleister Crowley, who comes in 1912. And Dancy then sets up the first draft. He basically needs to overthrow the Secret Service's role, because up until then, American intelligence was primarily carried out by what Lincoln created right before he died. 4 hours before he died, Lincoln creates the Secret Service, and then he's shot. And that was supposed to be the principal driving force of patriotic American intelligence. And that all of their functions were undone and given over to the new FBI. It was then given over to the IRS. So other functions that they were doing for counterfeiting and like to investigate counterfeiting and financial crimes was then given over to the IRS. That was created as part of the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve was created, and the IRS was created at the same time. And IRS agents became also then created to take over the control of what the Secret Service was. Also, Claude Dancy has because all of these guys are part of the Pilgrim Society, right, who are hosting him. He's the deputy head of MI6 and MI5. And he is then he's training a guy by the name of Van Damon and another guy named Marlborough Churchill, an American who's a cousin of Winston Churchill, who becomes the head of the Black Chamber that Dancy sets up. It's a signals encryption agency that's embedded within the U.S. military. This guy, it's Dancy who creates it through the Rockefeller Vanderbilt network at Sleepy Hollow. He creates this damn thing during World War I. This becomes the NSA. This becomes literally the friggin' NSA in 1930. It just gets a name change. And this is what becomes the basis of the Five Eyes, the U.S. branch of the Five Eyes, when Churchill comes in and signs the UK-USA signals agreement in 1947 with Truman, who's kind of like playing the role of a weaker version of a Teddy Roosevelt, maybe a little bit more regretful of what he's overseeing. But they're both racist anyway, so I have little sympathy for Truman. But it's all to say, it's like this is the thing that's growing and helping the growth of the Meyer Lansky, the Bronfman, all of this stuff. They're growing together with the financial parasite that they're also growing at the same time. It's one thing. People treat them as like there's books written by each of these things individually, but people don't often realize that you can't understand the growth of any one of these things without understanding all of them, and especially without understanding the Rhodes Scholarship, Fabian, Pilgrim Society, because that's what Tucker Carlson is a member of, and his father. They're members of the Pilgrim Society. That's what Kissinger oversaw. He was chairman of the Pilgrim Society. And when you get that sense, you're like, okay, yeah, that's the thing is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, hold on one second.
Mm.
There are a few things that you were talking about that I wanted to address.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned the 1901, 1902, 1903 timeframe. That's a really important timeframe. 1901, JP Morgan creates US Steel, which is a holding company designed to acquire all of the steel companies in the United States, which he then immediately sets to work doing by merging with the largest competitors and buying up all the smaller vendors like John Roebling's shop up in Trenton, New Jersey. Most of the steel industry was actually operating out of Trenton, New Jersey in 1903 when JP Morgan moves the entire steel industry, or most of the steel industry, which is operating primarily in Birmingham, Alabama, and Trenton, New Jersey, moves it from Trenton to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh becomes known as the Steel City. U.S. Steel, known as the corporation, that's what it was known as in Wall Street. You'll recall that in 1911, antitrust laws were used to break up Standard Oil, like the big oil company, right? Like the trust busters.
Yeah.
They tried to do this to U.S. Steel. They couldn't do it. U.S. Steel was too powerful. They weren't able to break up U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel 100% was a monopoly. They went out and bought every single competitor. They bought up every single like small little shop, and then ultimately leveraged their power to force the what was it called down in Alabama? It was called the I have it right here. It's called the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company, which is headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. That was its largest competitor in 1907. And then Tennessee Coal was replaced on the Dow Jones by General Electric. So Tennessee Coal, I think, becomes, if I'm not mistaken, General Electric. All this is the reason I bring up U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel, that was a very, very big deal when all this happened. Because of what just happened in the past 6 months with Donald Trump and U.S. Steel. Remember, there was a deal on the table for Nippon Steel out of Japan to purchase U.S. Steel and own U.S. Steel outright. That would have handed the entire U.S. steel industry, what remains of it, I mean, it's basically like a hollowed out shell of itself, to the Japanese. And the Japanese would then control U.S. Steel. Joe Biden, of all people, actually blocked it in early January. I think that's a devolution proof, to John Harold's credit. Blocks the deal, which allows Donald Trump to come in when he's sworn into office and negotiate what he wants to negotiate, because they were supposed to basically just buy it clean out and just own it outright. And Donald Trump exercises what is known as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. So the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is an interagency committee that reviews the national security implications of foreign investments in the U.S. It was created and established in 1975 by, of all people, Gerald Ford. Might be one of the only things that he contributed that ultimately became something good. It probably wasn't something good at the time. Under Executive Order 11858, pursuant to Section 721 of the Defense Production Act. And the reason it was created was, again, this is like very poetic, concerns about Japanese investment in the 1980s. So because of like the Japanese like buying everything up, they created this thing in 1975, and it was then expanded by the Exxon-Florio Amendment in 1988, which gave the president the power to block foreign deals after a Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. review, which is what Biden did back in January. He blocks it and puts it on pause. And then, so Trump comes in, and Trump calls this the golden share. He says, we have something special in this deal. They do end up allowing Nippon Steel to come in, and they don't buy it. They like invest in U.S. Steel. And I think Nippon is actually, it seems like they're unhappy with the way everything played out. It's like they went in like the shark. They went in to bite their prey, and then they actually got like a hook in the fish. Because Trump describes it as the golden share in U.S. Steel. And he says it gives him extraordinary control. There's an NPR interview right here with a woman named Sarah Barrell Dansman, who's a political economist at Indiana University. She is a case officer, or was a case officer at this CFI US, and she understands like how it works. And she's explaining that like the president has all this veto power. I think this article actually provides a better breakdown of what powers it says. It says Nippon can't close any factories. They can't cut salaries without Trump's approval. And the U.S. government is now allowed to appoint whoever they want to Nippon's board. So like, it's almost like Nippon went in to buy U.S. Steel, and then U.S. Steel ends up in a lot of ways taking over Nippon because of this like clause that it seems to me was put in under Ford in 1988. That would have been, Reagan Bush. So oddly enough, it's like this thing that was created when some pretty nefarious people were in office, Bush and Ford. It actually Trump ends up using it against these people. And now I think this is what's going to save the steel industry, is this like golden share, as Trump calls it. And now you have articles about Nippon Steel, which is right here.
Hold on. Gordon, keep it going. I just have a package that just came to the door. I have to get that, but I'll keep it going.
Yeah. So Nippon Steel, this is from August 1st. So, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, warns of annual loss due to charges related to the U.S. Steel acquisition. It revises its forecast to 40 billion yen loss from a 200 billion yen profit. So initially they were forecasting a 200 billion yen profit for 2025, and they have now adjusted it to a 40 billion, which is $266 million loss for 2025. And the reason is because they have to invest all this money to upgrade all these steel plants across the U.S. It says, let me see. We aim for U.S. Steel's contribution to reach 250 billion yen soon, but where was it? I had it pulled up on one of these tabs that they were forced to invest. Where was it? Bear with me here. Here it is. It may not let me access the article because you might have to have an account. This is from markets, from like a Wall Street website. I don't think it's gonna let me access the account. I mean the story, but it's Nippon Steel's to spend $3.1 billion revamping U.S. Steel's Gary Works. That's just one facility. So they're like, Nippon Steel is now required to invest billions and billions of dollars into U.S. Steel, like U.S.-based steel factories, which is going to bring American manufacturing back to life. And you missed it, but when you were gone, I was explaining how Nippon Steel is super salty right now. Here's an article from 3.5 weeks ago. They had to adjust their forecast for 2025. They were forecasting a 200 billion yen profit, and now they had to adjust it to a 40 billion yen loss. That's a 240 billion yen swing. And so the 40 billion yen is $266 million. So they've gone from what? That would be 266 times 5. I mean, you're talking about like $1.3 billion profit to a $266 million loss. Because of like the things that Donald Trump made them do when they acquired in order to finalize the U.S. Steel acquisition. They have to spend billions of dollars to upgrade the plants. Trump is allowed to appoint whoever he wants to the Nippon board, and they can't fire anybody they can't cut salaries or shut down any plants without Trump's approval.
And who do we know has been formerly because it's a Japanese steel company? Who have been the dominant interests running Nippon Steel? Like we know, U.S. Steel is run by the J.P. Morgan complex. Who was formerly running Nippon Steel?
I did this dig back in January and February.
Did you map out any like Japanese oligarchs or any Anglo-Japanese assets who are like untrustworthy?
I don't have anything in my map because none of the names like jumped off the page at me. Let's see, Fuji Iron and Steel, Yahata Steelworks. I mean, these are names that don't really mean a lot to me, but that doesn't mean they're not important. It was a lot of like metallurgy companies that I just wasn't familiar with, and there were a lot of like Japanese businessmen who I've never come across before, but could be connected to like the Trilateral Commission or something like that, but nothing that jumped off the page. But remember, the Japanese Prime Minister was like one of the first people to come visit Trump, and I think a big thing they were trying to figure out was this deal, the Nippon Steel deal. So anyway, I mean, that's just to say that there's an example of something that was really nefarious that was put in place by JP Morgan in 1901. They weren't able to break up the trust in 1911. 1913 happens. And then, basically we watched after World War II, we watched in the latter half of the 20th century, we watched the steel industry just get totally gutted from America. And then I think this Nippon deal was supposed to be the death knell. That was supposed to be the final nail in the coffin for American manufacturing. That would have just totally placed it in the hands of the Japanese and, out of the hands of American businessmen. And the fact that Trump was able to thwart that, I think, speaks volumes to what is actually happening versus what is being commonly shared and discussed, I think, when it comes to geopolitics.
Well, on that note, I noticed that Trump is pushing the U.S. into creating more federal stakes in certain corporate interests that are of a strategic value to the U.S., like Intel. I know that there's just the announcement
10%. We bought 10%.
We bought 10%, and I think the MP Minerals, one of the biggest mineral. I don't know if it's a cartel so much as a company, but they've got I think the U.S. now has a 40% stake in that. What do you think of the motion of? I mean, I know a lot of like detractors are saying this is like a communist move. That there's like, so what do you say, or what's your thought on the motion of the U.S. towards taking a more vested interest financially in these private companies?
And this is where I think like a lot of the education system, I think, has failed a lot of people in the U.S. Because it's easy to look at a move like this in a vacuum and be like, oh yeah, like. The U.S. government is now going to take an interest in private corporations. Like that is totally a socialist communist ideal. I thought we were against this stuff, guys. Yeah, but we are living under a thing called state capture, which means our government is totally controlled by a secret society, by a transnational cartel that operates to some extent out in the open. I mean, we know who a lot of these players are, at least the front men. But there's very little we can do to stop them because of the power they wield. So we saw this. I know this just from watching, like reading into the history of Putin. These are a lot of the moves that Putin made 25 years ago when he was trying to clean up Russia. The collapse of the Soviet Union. You had all these like state enterprises that were created, and Putin had to figure out ways to take the bones of the Soviet Union and try to piece together a functioning society that could actually prosper. Meanwhile, you had all these ex-KGB turned agents turned oligarchs from the aluminum wars of the 90s, who obviously were going to put their thumb on the scale and try to gain advantage. And Putin has gone to war with a few of them. He's made allies with a few of them. Gazprom, I was writing about them the other day. This is the central bank of it's not the central bank of Russia. They call it a central bank, but it's like seven basically money printers. It's like 7 printers / mint, 2 mints, 2 printers, 2 print houses, and like a print shop, I think is what it's called, and then a research and development, like fiscal research and development lab. That makes up this Gazprom thing, and they're now printing money for the Syrian government. They're printing money for a number these countries that I would say are, some of them seem like they're involved in the sovereign alliance. So, like those are examples of ways that, like Rosneft, like that can take us into the Matteo Salvini.
Let's do that. Let's use that
Salvini.
as the lunge into it, because
so,
that's how we started, and we never quite pulled on that thread. So let's see where that goes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well,
for those who don't, for those who have forgotten, I began today's show with hey Gordon, we were just talking about a little bit before the show about
an hour ago.
About an hour ago. Something you had observed about the deputy prime minister of Italy, who took a shot at Macron when Macron was calling for sending European troops along with Keir Starmer into Ukraine to fight the Russians. And he said something to the effect that, why don't you put on a helmet and a bulletproof vest and go there yourself? And it was a nice little jab. But this guy caught your radar, and you looked a little bit more into his background a bit. So why don't you say a word about this interesting figure?
For sure. Before I go there, it's just worth mentioning that this is now the lead story, like everywhere right now, is Trump said this morning to prosecute Soros. And the reason he said is that the support of violent protests and much more all throughout the United States of America. So there you go. They have the president of the United States now openly calling to prosecute Soros, which is, by the way, like a Putin. That's right out of the Putin playbook, because Soros is one of the first people Putin went after when he came into power in 2000.
Yes.
And by 2003, the Open Societies Foundation was out of Moscow and out of Russia. And then it became the poster child for Putin to pass legislation over the following 12 years to say these sort of NGOs are not allowed to function in Russia because they are subversive and they engage in regime change operations. And that's now what Trump is accusing Soros of doing.
And let me just add one thing to that the Putin approach to banning Soros and the Open Society outfit was using the model that was pioneered by China from 1989 onward, which was the first country in the world to officially crack down on Soros, prosecute all of the Soros assets, who had set up these Open Society foundations in China that oversaw the thing you and I had talked about already, this color revolution that had failed, one of the few color revolutions that had failed. And so China banned Soros back in 1989. He was never allowed to come back in or set up anything. His assets either had to go and leave through the Hong Kong triads and get set up in New York and England and Vancouver, where they became sort of part of this anti-China CIA MI6 operation outside of the borders of China, or they went underground. They went to jail. Kind of like a lot of the oligarchs then who were traitors, a lot went to jail, or they got sanctuary in England and set up this Moscow on the Thames in England, where they became, used to fund white revolutions against Putin and stuff over the years afterwards. But that's something that people often overlook. So I just wanted to tie that in there. And to see that Trump is actually walking the same sort of path is of an interesting thing on this front.
Oh, yeah. And this is like what Burning Bright has been talking about for years. Like, he's walking the same path that China has walked, that Putin has walked, and Xi has walked. And that, I think, speaks a lot to the sovereign alliance theory. Okay, so Matteo Salvini is a Italian politician who, if you were following politics during Trump's first term, this is a name that you're going to recognize, because he was, before Giorgia Meloni, who's the current prime minister of Italy, there was Matteo Salvini. So Matteo Salvini was he's a populist Italian politician who in the 2010s was trying to set up, populist, like a populist political party, spent years trying to do it, did a couple, they all kind of failed or fell apart. They didn't quite get the momentum they needed. And then suddenly in 2018, Trump's in office and he creates this new, so the story that I'm showing you here is he's the guy, like you said, who is, mocking Macron because Macron wants to prolong the war in Ukraine. And he's now calling for Macron to leave office because he's saying 80% of France's population doesn't like him and he should just go ahead and resign. Now, background on this guy, as I was saying, 2018, he is running for the prime minister of Italy. He's a populist. He's very much like a Trumpian candidate, to the extent that he actually, here's his Wikipedia, he actually just completely adopted the branding of, and I remember like tracking this in real time. Here is his 2018 like branding for the prime minister, Salvini Premier, and that is a carbon copy of the Trump 2016 MAGA branding, and he did that proudly. Like he did that because he was aligning himself with Trump and what Trump was accomplishing. Now, what really caught my eye as I was just like brushing up on this guy yesterday, as well, when I was writing the news brief article, was this, because we had our friend Alex Craner on here months ago, who writes for Zero Hedge, and he had mentioned, he had speculated that Banca Intesa, a bank in Italy, which is the largest bank in Italy now, as I understand it, might be involved in the, the family behind it, or the families behind it, the banking families behind it, might be involved in a white hat operation to save the world. That was his assertion. Not really speaking to the Sovereign Alliance or anything. That was just his own deduction that he had come to. Banca Intesa apparently is highly invested in, according to Craner, SpaceX, Tesla. He mentioned this massive Tesla facility and showroom in the Italian countryside near their headquarters. And so it says right here, on February 22nd, 2019, the Italian magazine L'Espresso published an investigation revealing a €3 million funding scheme. Now, this is in reference to what they're talking about, is the creation of this political party that Salvini creates in 2018 to run for prime minister. And it says, this Italian magazine publishes an investigation revealing a €3 million funding scheme for this political party, paid for by Kremlin-linked entities and disguised as a diesel sale. The scheme involved the Russian state-owned oil company Rosneft selling $3 million worth of diesel to an Italian company. Allegedly, the money was to be transferred from Rosneft to the League, which is the political party, through a Russian subsidy of the Italian bank Banca Intesa, in which League's federal council member Andrea Machetti is a board member. The money was supposed to fund the coming European election campaign. Italian authorities are currently investigating the matter. So, I guess it's officially still under investigation. But the other part of the Banca Intesa thread, so basically what they're saying there is they're saying that Putin was funding this guy, Matteo Salvini, through, like, it sounds like
I would say, though, look, on this stuff, I'm noticing that, because I'm on the same Wikipedia page as you, though, and I don't know if this is like a Russiagate style thing where they're making claims that are not proven.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Or because that's the dangerous thing with these Wikipedia entries, is that they take sometimes things that are, the Russiagate technique has been applied to overthrow patriots like Jeremy Corbyn in England and people like this by saying that there are these links that there aren't any when you explore it. So I don't know yet. I need some more serious evidence before treating the Wikipedia stuff as fact necessarily. Although I could definitely say they've got a much more rational view about the interests of Europe and Italy pertaining to Russia, and they do want good relations, friendship, economically with Russia, very much so. So that's for sure.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like, we are not accusing Banca Intesa of doing anything wrong. Like, that's not what we're accusing them of. And I would actually point to the whole Russiagate thing. Like, here's the fact with Russiagate. This is what Burning Bright says all the time. There was Russian like collusion between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and that's a good thing. So, like, that must be the thing that drives these people nuts the most, is that they're accusing Trump and Putin of, like, doing something nefarious or underhanded. I tend to believe that Trump and Putin have been working together this whole time and are actually in league, but not for the reasons or the end game that these people accuse him of.
Yeah, not to overthrow democracies, but rather just to try to avoid
rather to save civilization, basically, is the way I would describe it.
Well, I think the idea is, it's always been that way, is, whether you're in politics or whether you're in the private sector, you're trying to create outcomes that are beneficial for you and your interests. And so you're going to negotiate, you're going to try to create deals for economic trade development, which is better than going to war with your enemies, is to turn your enemies into your friends by finding ways to both benefit from economic development. So that's just like common sense. And all of a sudden, since 2016, all of a sudden that became like evidence of colluding with evil, bad Russia to try to take over the world and overthrow democracies. But yeah, that's very interesting that this guy is is definitely part of this rational dynamic.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, he's currently the deputy prime minister under Maloney. So he's like the vice president, I guess you would kind of say. Prime minister is the important role in in European governments. But here's an interesting like little caveat to kind of tie this all together.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that the Wikipedia entry says is repeated right here. That the inquiry follows an investigation by L'Espresso magazine, which alleged that there is an arrangement by Russian representatives close to Vladimir Putin's government to sell 3 million tons of diesel fuel to an Italian oil company, and that's what then the money was going to be given to these guys. And then it says right here, Milan's chief prosecutor Francesco Greco told ANSA news agency, quote, "We are carrying out investigations to understand if there are crimes or not." So even if these like allegations are true, have they actually committed a crime? That's the real question. Now, if you go back to the original reporting, because that article I think was from July of 2019. Here's the original report from February 2019, where this is like reporting on the L'Espresso article. You scroll down to the bottom, it says right here, last June, so that'll be June 2018, Salvini reacted angrily to a suggestion by billionaire financier George Soros that the League was receiving money from the Kremlin. I have never received a lira, a euro, or a ruble from Russia, Salvini said, which ostensibly, it sounds like that's true. It sounds like that like a sale was made to an Italian oil company, and then the Italian oil company purportedly maybe gave the money to this guy. I have no problem if Vladimir Putin was sending money this guy's way to help him cultivate a populist movement in Italy. History will exonerate any quote unquote legal wrongdoing that these people did under the twisted rules of the European Union and the demons that control the West right now, because the West is 100% controlled by Satan right now. I think that needs to be widely understood, that the people who stand up and present themselves as the quote unquote good guys are actually demons that are in service of Satan.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
it sounds for the uninitiated ear a little extreme, but yeah,
this is the direct way to say it. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, these people are some of the worst humans that ever lived. I would say. No,
I know.
And the stuff they've been involved in, and the stuff that they've pledged themselves to, is pure evil. So I have no. That's why I have no interest in like negotiating with them when it comes to the 2026 midterms or the 2028 Republican candidate. It's like the Republican Party has been at the tip of the spear of trying to keep Donald Trump out of office. Like, I have no interest in negotiating with the Republican Party. And then, watching Brad Zerbo's Codex 9/11 film, we know what the Republican Party did on 9/11. The Republican Party, the leadership of the Republican Party, conspired to murder Americans in order to drag us into a forever war in the Middle East that we're still now dealing with. So I have no sympathy or empathy when it comes to the Republican Party or the powers that be that control the United States.
Yeah, my God. No, it's and for those watching who have not yet watched Brad Zerbo's Codex 9/11, it's a masterpiece. It's a work of art, and I've seen hundreds of films, of documentaries, of podcasts since 2004 when I began this obsession with 9/11. I've seen so many, and I did not think that there was anything new that I could learn on the topic. And then I saw Brad Zerbo's film at GART in South Dakota, and my mind was actually blown many times over. And I couldn't encourage more people. I mean, I'm sure if people are watching this right now, they've probably already watched it, but share it and share it again, share it some more, and get that thing out there. It's really, really vital that people consume and take in the lines of investigation that he puts out that are just so bloody rigorous and comprehensive. It's yeah. Sorry, I saw that you raised your finger.
Well, it's not enough for people in this community to watch that film. That film is I describe it as a narrative weapon of mass destruction, because I think it is perfectly tailored. I think Brad did such a good job with it, because he restrained himself from going down a lot of the rabbit holes that I would be inclined to go down, that others would be inclined to go down, because you get into a lot more into like the speculation. You get a lot more into, trying to deduce who was behind this whole thing. He focuses just on what he can basically demonstrate right in the here and now, based on what was being reported that day, what was being, the things leading up to the event, the things happening right after the event. I think he did a really good job to make it quote unquote normie friendly. So you should be sharing that with every person who is not into this stuff, who is not thinking the way that we're thinking, because that film, we had a number of people in the room in Deadwood who didn't believe, like who didn't align with us when it came to 9/11. They accepted the official narrative to some extent. They accepted the official narrative that it was, Muslim terrorists from a foreign country, like that kind of thing.
Right.
They didn't buy into like it was an inside job. They now 100% buy into it was an inside. Like Ash's husband totally changed him after that. He was totally changed. He was like, holy crap. Like it was an inside job. Yeah, it was an inside job. And that is the weapon. Like that's the moment of like the mushroom cloud, is when disrupting that official narrative that it was an actual inside job. Who was actually behind it and animating the whole thing is a separate question, a separate investigation that needs to be adjudicated. But what Brad proves definitively is that it was an inside job, that people at the highest levels of the U.S. government conspired to murder Americans that day. They had foreknowledge of it. They were involved in it. There were plans about it. And that changes everything, because now the Republican Party has to address that. I don't want to hear about a midterm election in 2026. I want to hear, why were you, who in your party was complicit? Who knew what when, and who needs to go to jail for the rest of their life? Who needs to be tried for treason? Who needs to be tried for murdering millions or thousands of Americans, millions of people in the Middle East? Who needs to be tried for war crimes? That's what we need to be, the conversation that we need to be having. Not, who's going to be the candidate in 2028. No. You'll be lucky, Republican Party, if you even exist as an entity in 2028. That's the conversation. And we have to assert our authority, if basically as a population, where we can't allow these people to shame us into remaining silent. And that's why that documentary, it does all the talking for us. Just share it with all the people and people will stop and think, well, I shouldn't be listening to these people anymore. I shouldn't be listening to what Mitch McConnell says. Like, who cares what Mitch McConnell and Fox News was the one shoving 9/11 down my throat. Yeah. Fox News was complicit in the scheme.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely, yeah. No, and I it's such a service to humanity what Brad was able to pull off over years of work and research, and your points are very well taken. My concern, as well, as people know, is that I see the same sort of techniques that were applied to get us to go and acquiesce to the idea of supporting this war against Arab countries that had nothing to do with that event, that had everything to do with these Satanists that had infiltrated our governments and had murdered our own people. But the same kind of like psychological prompts, hypnotic inductions, and techniques of trickery of the mind are I just see the replication of those things being used now specifically against China. And that's what my big like concern right now is it seems negligible for many people, but the idea of making China the arch nemesis and evil behind all of America's problems, that's something that a lot of, especially conservative minded people, are getting like sort of enwrapped in. And I'm just putting that out there as like a thing to just be aware and have your sentinels on guard that the same thing is being done. And if there is going to be another inside job that is unleashed at any moment in the coming weeks or months ahead, of which there's a high danger, especially at the time of systemic breakdown, when the enemy is weakened and afraid and angry and has run out of options, one thing that the oligarchy has always done is they've knocked over the chessboard and they've just ushered in chaos to try to like bring in some form of imposed order out of the chaos after they've like kicked everything into scrambles. And the way that they always do it is they create some mass casualty event. They blame a convenient boogeyman. They get everybody to like go on the rampage, lose their minds. And what comes out of it is always worse than what we had going into the thing. So that's just something there. But I'd say, look, we went through a lot today. This was a pretty off the cuff, fun presentation. And I don't know if What I'm going to do is gear up to play the second ad that I forgot to do of Rise Attire.
Do that.
And maybe what you could do is think about how whether or not there's any comments or questions or anything from the audience or the boosts, and we could taper it out.
Yep.
All right.
Let's do that.
Rise Attire time.
Howdy, Badlanders. Looking for something new to grab from your friends at Badlands Media and Rise Attire? Summertime is here. We got you covered. All new tank tops for men and women, featuring new iterations of the Devolution design in black, red, white, and even blue and green digital camo. Sick. We got them for Psywar and Clown World too. How about these bad boys? Psywar, Clown World, and Devolution beach towels to help you spark up a conversation with your new best friend or future spouse at the pool. And by popular demand, we've got all new athletic women's leggings that'll have you red-pilling all the ladies in your Pilates class, whether they like it or not. Too bad. This is Badlands, baby, and we're strapped. Get some and support the new media parallel economy as much as f***ing possible at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
Pretty funny ad. He's got a gear up. We need a new autumn ad though. Summer's tapering out, so gears need to be shifted on that soon.
Yeah, the and so you make a good point on the China thing, because that is what's happening right now. Right now they're trying to, now that the Middle East is a smoldering crater, they, because of everything that we've done there over the past 25 years, at the behest of Israel, of course, they're now trying to shift our focus. The neocons, the Trotskyite Bolsheviks, the communists who run the Republican Party are now trying to shift our focus to China and saying we need to go to war with China, and all of your sons and daughters need to go die in a meaningless war against China so that they can stay in power and become super rich like they did from the Middle East. There are people in the truth movement, by the way, who claim to have authorities, like they claim to have contacts in the intelligence community. I'm not going to name names, but people have been coming into my chats and my comments and saying you should go check out what this person's saying, because they're saying the opposite of what you're saying. I spent the first hour of my geopolitics show yesterday digging in to like the South Korea thing, because I think that, you know, the North Korea South Korea is a proxy. It's a proxy conflict for the China-U.S. Would-be conflict, right? And we've spent a lot of time over the past year talking about the poop balloon psyop and all the things that happened between Kim Jong-un and President Yoon in South Korea. President Yoon has been thrown in prison. He's facing treason charges. He imposed martial law, tried to start a war with North Korea, which failed spectacularly. And then this President Lee Jae-myung was, I think I'm saying his name right, was elected in June, and everyone across the entire spectrum, including like in the truth movement, were lamenting the fact that this guy got elected, because they were like, he's a communist, he's pro-Russia, he's pro-China, he's going to betray us, he's going to side with the Chinese, he's going to side with the Russians. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. So President Lee comes to the White House on Monday, and everyone's expecting it to be like even Lee's own people were saying like they were worried that it was going to be a Zelensky moment where, you know, J.D. Vance and Trump team up on him. Didn't happen. Instead, we actually got this moment, and this is worth playing. I'm just going to play the last 30 seconds of this clip.
그래서 전 세계가 인정하는 정말 세계사적인 평화의 메이커로서의 역할을 꼭 해주시기를 기대합니다.
And I would like to mention that the only remaining divided nation in the world is the Korean Peninsula. And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I look forward to your meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un and construction of a Trump Tower in North Korea and playing golf at that place.
아마 기다리고 있을 것 같습니다. 기다리고 있을 것 같습니다.
So I believe he will be waiting for you.
The president of South Korea suggesting that Donald Trump build a Trump Tower in North Korea and then go play golf on a golf course in North Korea with Kim Jong-un, who he says he is sure Kim Jong-un will be eagerly waiting for Trump to arrive at the first hole on the golf course. That is what we have now. Meanwhile, you have figures in our movement who claim to have contacts inside the intelligence agencies that are telling them that Lee is the bad guy, and Yoon, who is currently in prison for treason because he's tried to start a war with North Korea. That is what happened. That Yoon is actually the good guy, and that the ascension of Lee is like a J6, Trump Biden moment all over again. When it's actually the opposite. Yoon, I believe, was the CIA. I don't have any way of knowing this. I have no friends, contacts, anything like that. This is just my own discernment. But digging into all of the things that have happened from every angle, it seems to me that Yoon is 100% the CIA shill who replaced Moon. Moon was before him. Remember, Moon is like the quote-unquote liberal. Lee is the quote-unquote liberal, and Yoon is the quote-unquote conservative. That's how it's presented to us in the American media. I don't think those words actually mean the same thing over there that they mean over here. But that's how it's presented to us. Moon was there during 2017 to 2022. That was Moon. He was considered a liberal. So Fox News doesn't like him. Moon is the one who went and met with Kim Jong-un, smiling next to him, saying, we're going to make peace. Wrote an autobiography saying that Kim Jong-un told him he wanted to denuclearize because he didn't want his daughter to grow up the way he grew up. And that Kim Jong-un is actually a really good person and that we should all learn to trust Kim Jong-un. That's what Moon said. And then Yoon comes in and basically reverses all that and says, no, Kim Jong-un is the bad guy. We're gonna set up megaphones, speakers at the DMZ and blast K-pop and send propaganda balloons into North Korea, which is what prompted the poop balloon campaign. And then we're going to do this false flag martial law thing to try to create the appearance of a war with North Korea. Yeah, man. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now Lee is in, and Lee is the communist liberal.
What I find,
destroy South Korea. But yeah,
what I find is so interesting about Lee Jae-myung is, and not only did he also said that Kim Jong-un may equally come in October to the next APEC summit, which Trump is invited to. So that would be interesting if you both have Trump and Kim Jong-un arrive at the next, not APEC, like not the Jewish lobby, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation.
The Asia Pacific, the Asia Pacific meeting. Yeah.
That would be fascinating if Trump and Kim Jong-un were to appear there, where likely Xi Jinping and others will be also present. Very, very fascinating. And the thing about Lee, the current guy, is that he's also carried out an interesting crackdown on a couple of U.S. military bases in South Korea that are tied to some. There's a lot of smoke and there's not a lot of transparency about what exactly it is. However, we know that the U.S. military bases in South Korea have been used for very, very nefarious purposes. Illegal, bioterror laboratories that Obama had set up under the Jupiter Centaur labs of South Korea that were exposed for creating weaponized smallpox, anthrax, other things that leaked. And there were protests all over South Korea that you have foreign Pentagon managed military bases carrying out bio warfare. We know that gene targeting, ethnic gene targeting, has been a high priority under the neocon bioterror infrastructure builders. That it's part of the Project for New American Century program, was specifically needing to invest billions of dollars into ethnic targeting of bioweapons pathogens. That freaks out South Koreans who share a lot of genetic stock with Han Chinese. The Russians have been freaked out about this in Ukraine and Georgia. These different biolabs run opaquely by the United States. That was a big part of what even Victoria Nuland admitted was there, which has been acquiring Slavic genetic material in order to try to engineer pathogens, bacteria, other things that would specifically be fatal to certain type of ethnotypes and not so fatal to others. So that's a big part of the thing that's been built up since the anthrax attacks after 9/11, which were part of the same inside job apparatus starting in December of 2001, or was it September 19th of 2001, right? That was the first anthrax attack. And then that justified the Dick Cheney complex of BioShield, the multi-billion-dollar counter bioterror warfare apparatus that amplified all of the U.S. biolabs around the world, and they're all surrounding China. So I'm hoping that that's the sort of thing that was cracked down upon by Lee Jae-myung. What else there is, we might have to wait and see. But you got there's another thing that he also cracked down on too that I'm going to say something about, but you have a link from RT there. What's this?
Well, it's interesting you said that, because there is like the one thing that RT actually reported on between this meeting is not a lot came out of this meeting. I mean, there wasn't like a formal like agreement or announcement, and the media has been slamming Trump for that, being like, yeah, what a pointless meeting. Nothing was announced or came out of it. Well, we did announce like a few weeks ago that South Korea was signing a tariff deal that was akin to the EU tariff deal, where they're going to invest like $350 billion in the U.S. and buy $100 billion worth of energy, etc. But there was this story, is the one story that RT wrote about, which is that Trump wants U.S. to own land for military bases. So it's funny you bring that up, because it kind of had me scratching my head. Like, of all the things for them to focus on, this is what they extracted out of that conversation. Trump saying that he'd like to see the U.S. be given ownership of the land as opposed to like signing a long-term lease. And, whether that actually ends up coming to fruition or not, the focus is now on U.S. military bases in South Korea. So that's really interesting, because I didn't even know that President Lee had been cracking down on U.S. military bases there.
Well, yeah, the one specific one was the Osan military base, which I still have to look more into. And apparently it's some sort of a purge revolution going on. So there's some sort of a draining of the swamp, it seems. And the other thing that is very interesting is that, I just found this, I was just reading up on this morning, is that he's also cracking down on the Unification Church. That's big. So that's the Reverend Sum Young Moon's cult. For those who lived through the 70s, they noted that there's a lot of CIA-sponsored cults that just cropped up all over North America, but also Japan, South Korea too. It's one operation, and the Sum Young Moon Unification Church was a big one that did these like collective marriage ceremonies, and people would be matched by those whatever high elect officials around Sum Young Moon and his wife, who could see people's auras and where their twin flame was sort of reincarnated into that they should marry, even if they've never met this person. So you had a lot of weird stuff, like a lot of slave labor too, very Scientology-esque in some ways. But it became a big part of the organization of organized crime. It interfaced with the Italian and Jewish mafias in a number of ways. Books have been written about this stuff. And even the guy who killed the former president of Japan, Abe, was
the former prime minister,
had a big chip on his shoulder. I don't know exactly the details, but his mom apparently lost everything to the Unification Church in Japan, which has a huge hub there. So that was a big motivating factor, because he believed that Abe had given support to the Unification Church, and that's why Abe had to die. There's some weird stuff left and right. Yeah,
that is really interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it owns the Empire State Building. Like, the freaking Empire State Building of the United States is owned. Yeah, it's the Unification Church.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look into this thing now. Okay,
well, yeah,
I have my homework assignment. So, like, the one thing we didn't get to, which maybe we'll cover next week, is this plot to overthrow Zelensky with this guy Zelensky. Like, you and I talked about this. The former commander of the Ukrainian armed forces that was fired by Zelensky in February, like a year and a half ago. And then just became the ambassador to Britain and has been living in London ever since. And apparently in London, the official story is that he's been courting all of these world leaders who've been coming and visiting with him, allegedly JD Vance as well. And they're basically plotting a military coup against Zelensky. But the reason they give for plotting a military coup against him is because they want to install a legitimate military leader so they can restore the flow of money and weapons from the U.S. to Ukraine, because we don't give them money and weapons anymore. We sell weapons to NATO, and then NATO gives them the weapons, and that's bankrupting NATO. So in order to restore that direct pipeline from the U.S. to Ukraine, they want to install like a legitimate military leader who will give confidence that they have a chance of winning this thing. JD Vance might be involved in it. I don't know. Like, JD Vance's name is being thrown around as somebody who's meeting with this guy. may or may not be true. I don't know.
I don't know.
But there are U.S. officials who are attending, meetings at. This is all according to the Russian security services. So take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, those guys have been a lot more honest than our intelligence services have been. But they said that there have been all these meetings at these undisclosed alpine resorts between British officials, U.S. officials, and this guy Zelensky, who says that the Azov battalion neo-Nazis should be hailed as role models. They should be statues built to them. Every school child, all the school children should be taught about the Azov battalion and the heroes of Ukraine, the same way that the USSR taught the children about the Bolsheviks. That's what he said.
Oh, what a freak! Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Obviously, this guy's the bad actor. And that just reinforces like Burning Bright's theory of our boy Z, that Zelensky is actually the guy that Trump wants to prop up because Zelensky's such a clown that he's like, it's almost like a humiliation ritual against Ukraine to have.
I mean, anybody who's made it, especially from a place as controlled as Ukraine, if you're made the ambassador to England, you've got to be highly vetted. You're going to be privy to some very dark shit, and you got to be vetted in some inner clubs that result in me also not trusting you immensely. It doesn't mean everybody who's an ambassador to the UK is going to be bad, but for some place like Ukraine, there's something shady. So yeah, I tend to side with what you're saying here. Yeah. Okay.
The other guy who's involved, by the way, is Yermak, who is Zelensky's personal aide. So this would be, just for those watching, this would be like Dan Scavino plotting with the Democrats to take out Donald Trump. That's like what's happening right now, is that Zelensky's top aide, Yermak, is plotting with the Americans and with the British to take out Zelensky and install this deep state shill as the president of Ukraine. And he's the guy who was in charge of all of like the Ukrainian military up until February 2024. And they obviously pulled him out because he was failing. And then they plugged him into a role that would have him living in London. And then while living in London, he's just been nonstop, they say, meeting with world leaders about the Ukraine situation. So grooming him, I think, for like to come in as like the legitimate Ukrainian leader who's going to finally take it to Vladimir Putin, right?
All right. Well, maybe. So for the next show, we can maybe like lunge into that and see where that's going, because I'd like to think, I know Witkoff is going to be meeting with envoys from Zelensky. That was announced this morning. Is there any possible outcome that doesn't involve slaughtering all of Ukraine in some mass sacrifice for some geopolitical ambition? I really do hope so. I'd like to think that something tangible came out of the Trump-Putin meeting on that front.
Not if Lindsey Graham has anything to say about it. But
yeah,
yes.
Sure. Right, the last Ukrainian. You got to fight to the last one.
Yeah, right.
And beyond. Okay. All right. Well, let's round out there. That's pretty good. I mean, unless you have a final thought you wanted to toss out.
Just the rants.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's a good place to end it. Ashley D. She says, "Heavenly Father, we ask that you wrap your loving arms around those in Minnesota right now, especially those little ones. Keep our first responders safe. Amen." Yeah. Apparently, I think there was a shooting in Minnesota.
Yeah, like 20 people injured as far as I last read, and a few dead, but I don't know what the current count is.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah. Prayers to anyone who's affected, involved, obviously killed. It's awful. It's terrible. And then let's see. I think we might have some boosts, but it's hard to find the boosts because there's just pages and pages of boosts for the Codex 911, and that makes me very happy.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, more than deserves it. So I gotta just give me a second to scroll back a few pages just to make sure that I don't want to miss anybody who was kind enough to give us something.
Sure.
But yeah, why don't you tell everyone what you have coming up this week? You have a show on Sunday?
Yeah, right. Sure, why not? So yes, the last show, Pluralia Dialogos, that I did. So every 2 weeks, for those who don't know, 11 a.m. Sundays, New York time, I do a Pluralia Dialogos show featuring geopolitical experts. Just had Glenn Deason and Alex Craner on as my guests, and that went really well. It's on the Pluralia platform. That's also the sort of geopolitical information arm of of Banco Intesa. So they're, you know, it's been a fun exercise to just have discussions with people from academia, from military intelligence, from all over the Western world, from the US and from Europe, to talk about their views about how to get an off-ramp out of the World War III scenario and into a better future. So that's been pretty fun. The other thing is that I'm going to be having, Cynthia and I are going to be going to Toronto. That's actually one thing. So anybody who's listening right now who happens to be in or around Toronto, Ontario, September 6th and 7th, we're going to be screening our Hidden Hand Behind UFO film, episode 4, Roswell and the Birth of a New Legend, where we expose the intelligence agencies, the black magicians who have been organizing and incubating this new world religion, utilizing as the backbone of their entire story from 1947 onward, the story of crashed UFOs that have been interfacing with governments, and that are now preparing us for the big disclosure that's coming on soon. And there will be more of this coming on fast, but I got to say, it isn't what you're being told. It is tied to the Rockefeller Foundation, Lawrence Rockefeller specifically, and a bunch of Satanists that have infiltrated our military, going back to even before the Vietnam War, who have been playing a key role. Also, we tie in the murderers of JFK into the big UFO disclosure operatives from the 60s onward. Many key players are going to be outlined. So that's going to be in the middle of the Toronto Film Festival, the International Film Festival. We have a whole cinema that it's going to be aired. And we're selling tickets. So people go to my Substack. It's actually right there under my name, Matteo Ehret. There's matthewehret.substack.com. Go there. You'll see the featured image or post is selling tickets on Eventbrite. It's only $10 a ticket. We got a space for 30 VIP tickets for a little 1-hour pre-event show, or not a show, just a sort of cocktail period at the lobby of the cinema. That's also available on the Eventbrite. The next day, Cynthia, myself, and our friend David Goslin are going to be doing another symposium at an event just east of Toronto. It's a little drive away in Pickering, Claremont. So people could buy tickets to that. It's going to be a 3-part event at a beautiful, beautiful retooled barn with a chandelier. It's kind of nice. So that's going to be on Dark Ages and Renaissances. So what are the dynamics historically and currently that shape Dark Age dynamics, culturally, politically, banking, and what about the more natural human thing that we do from time to time, which we should learn from, which is express Renaissance dynamics, both looking at case studies of ancient India, China, Europe, and beyond, to see what is the commonality, what is the common principle being tapped into that pertains to the nature of the creator, creation, human nature, which is more noble. And so we'll be looking at that from a number of perspectives, and we'll have a good dialogue with the audience too. Those Eventbrite tickets are also available on the same post. So those are the two big things coming up in 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Ashley D just came in with a boost as well, saying thank you guys, appreciate all you do. Thank you, Ashley. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for being here. Please hit the thumbs up on your way out, and we will see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.